See, Secretary General, Fellow, FIAP, Diplomat of Pediatric Environmental Health, Member of Environmental Health.
Good evening, everyone. Can you please make me full screen? Am I visible? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Jagdish. Good evening, Dr. Subbu. And thank you for giving me this privilege of being a moderator for this session. And today's guest speaker is Dr. Ramesh Kumar, who is familiar to all of us. He has been a very vibrant, active Secretary General of IAP for the last 2 years. And he is also into the respiratory medicine and environmental medicine. And he is very active in this allergy and environmental chapter. And it is a privilege to have you, Dr. Ramesh Kumar. And he will be talking on a very important topic, which is difficult to treat asthma. Now, before I request Dr. Ramesh Kumar, I would request Dr. Jagdish Chenappa, who is the chairperson of IAP Respiratory Chapter, to say a few words. Dr. Jagdish, please.
Thank you, Dr. Jain Joshi, for that invite, and Dr. Subbu, my Secretary General. We, from the Respiratory Chapter, we are very, very glad to invite our family member from Kerala, Dr. Ramesh Kumar. I am not going to talk too much about his achievements, which is going to be spoken in detail by Dr. Subramania. But we invite you to this platform, sir, and we are hoping to get a fantastic lecture as usual from you. So I hand it over to Dr. Subramania for highlighting all the achievements that you have done and you are yet to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jagdish. For the viewers, I just wanted to tell you only a couple of things. IAP Respiratory Chapter is proud to have Respinars. We have a series of webinars that have been very popular amongst many, and I can see that there are many attendees in spite of the webinar fatigue, which is, at least there are good number of fan following Respiratory Chapter, which is very, very soothing to all of us as office bearers, myself, Jagdish Chenappa, Jayant, everybody. So it is a very soothing feeling for all of us. I think it is very pleasant, and we are overwhelmed and we are thankful to you for this kind of encouragement in the adverse situations like this. You are still logging and you are patronizing and encouraging us. This is part number one. Second is that many of you, I request you, please become members of the chapter. You support little more, and not many of you are already, and I want you to make many more members who are just your neighbors. Whenever we send the messages, I will send a WhatsApp number in the chat box. Please note down. I will send you the membership form. It's just one click, single minute procedure. You are into our family. So this is the second request. We will not disappoint you. We will bring in series of east-west, east-far east combinations and bring in lot of faculties. We are having some tough time in getting their schedules. Some people in UK, US, a couple of them from Australia, they are all giving their schedules based on their conveniences. So we are readjusting our webinars based on the schedule from the faculties from abroad. This is number 3. Number 4 is we wanted to have a session on asthma further, and very soon we are going to launch and bring to your doorstep the newly formed asthma training module as per the revised guidelines from GINA, which has been incorporated as well and very much Indianized. So it will be available to all of you. So somebody is texting me, sir, in Telegram group, link not sent. I'm extremely sorry, Abhishek. Next time I will not do this mistake. I will send. I'm sorry, I sent it in all WhatsApp groups. I'm sorry. You can even now post Abhishek if you don't mind. Dr. Abhishek, thank you for that comments. Now I will introduce Dr. Ramesh Kumar, who is our guest speaker today. He has been the Honorary Secretary of Central IAP in 2018 and 19, before which he was Fellow of Indian Academy of Pediatrics. He was a Diplomat of Pediatric Environmental Health, International Pediatric Association. He was a member of Environmental Health Technical Advisory Group of IPA. He was the chief editor of Enrich, the popular journal in 2011-16 and Pediatric Companion 2011 to 15. Editor of many textbooks, journals, authored many textbooks as well. And he is one of the authors of even our postgraduate teaching module as one of the section editors, which we are going to release soon. He has been a faculty of IUP clinical programs, Central IUP EB member 4 times, National President of Environmental and Child Health Group in 2017-18, and President of LNF Kerala 2015-16, Secretary of IAP Kerala 2009-10, Senior Consultant and Head of the Department of Pediatrics at Apollo Adlax Hospital at Cochin. But this is only a formality. He's good friend of all of us and ever smiling to it may be that it's not fair on our part to introduce him, but from the chapter it is our responsibility to introduce a faculty. So therefore I did this exercise, and we are going to have a mouth-watering session on difficult asthma. Asthma is difficult, and we may make it less difficult by our resource person in difficulties, Dr. Ramesh Kumar. So I would hand it over to Dr. Jayant Joshi to take a final call and inviting our guest today. And dear friends, whenever you find an opportunity, please note my WhatsApp number. I would be very happy if each one of you make another 200 members of the respiratory chapter. We have a very big ambition. Each one of you should make another 200 members in just 1 week. And Jayant is smiling. He has already made many. So over to Dr. Jayant.
Thank you, Dr. Subbu. I think I must put it on the record here, the amount of efforts you are putting in for making the new members for our respiratory chapter. And it's a fantastic job you are doing. But don't be too greedy. I think people... Okay. It's a privilege to welcome Dr. Ramesh Kumar, and I think he's been introduced aptly, and we all know him. We are all familiar with him. So over to Dr. Ramesh Kumar. For all the delegates who are attending, you can put your questions on the chat box or in the question box, and we will take all the questions at the end of the session. Dr. Ramesh Kumar, please.
Thanks, Dr. Jayan, Dr. Subramania, Dr. Jagdish sir for the sweet introduction. Respected Chairperson Dr. Jayant Joshi, Chairperson and the President of the National Respiratory Chapter of Indian Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Jagdish Chinnappa, the Secretary General of the Chapter, Dr. Subramania, Dr. Jayant Joshi, the Office Bearer, Dr. Sushant Mane, Scientific Coordinator, my seniors in the fraternity, my dear friends, and all those who postgraduates and all those friends who have joined from IAP family, who have joined in for the session today. Good evening, and I believe it's a great privilege to be with our friends in the respiratory chapter of Indian Academy of Pediatrics. Friends, at the outside, let me place my sincere gratitude to Dr. Jagdish Chinnappa, Dr. Subramania, as well as Dr. Jayant Joshi, and Sushant Mane for and all the office bearers in the respiratory chapter for the opportunity to be with you this August platform. And I must congratulate the office bearers, especially Dr. Subramania, as well as working overtime. And I believe Dr. Joshi has put it as well as don't be too greedy. You are putting a hard task, and I know you are always a hard taskmaster. So 200 members for every member is something which I believe you are putting too much on them, but the way you are ambitious can always be good, and the team should really be developing into a big chapter. And I must congratulate you for the webinar series. You had a wonderful cream of international faculty who have brought so much of credibility and credentials to this group and this webinar. And that's why I believe even I am so privileged to be in this platform where the many August speakers have been there always and synchronized with you, and maybe many more are to come from the east and the west, as Dr. Subbu has put it. So let's have some good, exciting time ahead in the respiratory chapter as well as in the webinar. And with Dr. Jagdish Chinnappa and Dr. Subramania as well as Jayant Joshi and all leaders out there, I am sure there should be a dashing time for the respiratory chapter ahead. Friends, my session I must get going to our presentation for the day. And let me take a few minutes to a second to share how the screen. Fine, friends. Our session for the day is something difficult, or is it actually difficult? Maybe at the 9 o'clock or 9 p.m. Is it fair to talk on something difficult? It should be something easy coming up in the late hours. But it is not. It's really going to be easy only. It is not a difficult proposition, but I am going to be there to put it before you. Asthma, that difficult many a time as per the parents, as per the perception of the pediatricians, or as per the perception of the practitioners. And many a time when we dissect it, we find that we ourselves are a little fault, or we could have done a better job rather than making it a little difficult. So my question or my poster right now here is, are they actually difficult, or are we at fault for making it a little difficult? Let's see. I'm putting so much of difficult words time and again, but I must say. So friends, there are difficult to treat asthma. I must at the outset put it into two categories. One category A, where it's not genuinely difficult, and a category where it is difficult, truly difficult asthma. And I'm so happy to mention here that constitutes only 1%. It's truly a blessing for our asthmatic children who suffer from asthma. A difficult asthma is hardly maybe 1% or 2%. We don't have much evidences to classify, and there is not much of clear classification. It's based on a GINA guideline. So we don't have any robust evidence on that, how far it is. But as per the perception of the North America, the National Asthma Eradication Program in North America and other parts of our studies, it's something around less than 5% for 3-4%, or hardly around 1%. So difficult asthma per se is asthma that's uncontrolled despite appropriate step 4 treatment of GINA guidelines. As the child is into GINA step 4 and still the asthma is not controlled, or the symptoms are not controlled. So let's see what then. For that, you must know what step 4 treatment of GINA. Step 4 treatment, I'm just taking a prototype only, 6 children in the stage of 6 to 11 years. And GINA, of course, from 2019 have categorized into 3, 6 to 11 years, 11 years plus, 12 years plus, and less than 6 years. But for all reasons, mostly we get children into 6 to 11 years. So what you see is the step 4 here. Step 1 is the low dose. As you know, I'm not going to those details because I'm focusing on my topic in our session for the day, difficult asthma only. So up to step 3, they are easily managed. And children who go into step 4, they require medium dose inhaled corticosteroids, either a standalone or in combination with a long-acting beta-2 agonist. And that's a level where you give step 4. And even certain situations we give high dose ICS or LABA. So if a child is not settled with by all reasons, not settled with the medium dose ICS alone or in combination with the LABA, we can better call it as a difficult asthma, because we don't have to go into the other small caveats here. It is only, you take it as, if it is not controlled by medium dose ICS, you better take it as a difficult asthma. Then we should know what is the medium dose, because having said medium dose, my job is unfinished, because most of us time and again find it a little difficult to recap what is low dose, medium dose, high dose. It's simple. You remember a combination of inhaled corticosteroid, budesonide, 400 micrograms in a child less than up to 20 years, up to 400. You take a child of receiving a budesonide 200 microgram BD is in the medium dose, and if it requires more than 200 microgram BD twice daily, or it goes into 600 micrograms or something above, 400 above, this child is going to have a high dose, and that goes into a difficult asthma. A child above 12 years, here the ceiling is 800 mics. So that 200 microgram BD, 202 is still permissible. So if it's not settled by that budesonide ICS, child requires oral steroids or child requires something else, then that you can call it as a difficult asthma. And another usual combination is the inhaled corticosteroid what we use is the fluticasone. So fluticasone up to 500 micrograms at any age, less than, maybe it's used off label, it's used below 4 years, but ideally recommended above 4 years only. So 500 mics in any age, fluticasone 250 microgram BD. If it is used above that or requirement is above that level, that again the child falls into a high dose requirement, and that comes as a difficult asthma. So you can see again age group, the load is a budesonide or beclomethasone here, fluticasone here. It's up to 100 to 400. Up to 400 is low dose, 400 to in a 12 years. So you can see medium dose budesonide up to 800 micrograms in a child above 12 years. Below 12 years, it's only 400. So as I mentioned, the same fluticasone up to anything up to above 500 is considered as high dose. Here 800 and 400 below above 12 years and below 12. So this requirement runs into something called a difficult asthma. Sometimes high dose is still taken as not a difficult one, but there is no hard and fast categorization there. For our practical purposes, we take this group as a high dose or difficult asthma. So having seen this 1%, children who require budesonide more than 400 microgram, fluticasone more than 500 microgram, or still they are having symptoms, that category is only 1% of the difficult to treat asthma. So let's see how then we can proceed with a proper algorithmic approach to this such set of patients. So my slide for the day runs into these 6 categories. If you feel that your child is not controlled with, the symptoms are not controlled despite sufficient treatment, you just revisit for the diagnosis and rule out mimics. If the child is having still asthma alone or is some asthma masquerades, if there are some other issues, even it can be cystic fibrosis or anything, bronchiolitis, or then if it is not improved, you can have a look at the comorbidities. The child is having an allergic rhinosinusitis, it is not improving. You are not addressing a GERD, the child is not improving. Obesity, child is not improving. That has to be addressed. If the triggers are there, whether you are not taking cognizance of the triggers, so that's why the child is not responding. Whether the compliance is good, you may have counseled the parents appropriately, but still they may not be adhering to your directions. They may not have understood it properly. They may not be doing it. Maybe a child may be deliberately ignoring it. And then a sort of asthma education. And this 1%, biologicals and others, are the ones which are the drugs, the treatment modality for the children who are genuinely difficult to treat. That 1% which I have mentioned. So what we can see is the first 5 steps, like the care of the mimics, the comorbidities, the trigger, addressing the triggers, the adherence proper techniques, that will filter 99% of asthma cases will be filtered by these steps up to 5. So only 1% that require the last step, like biologicals, long-acting muscarinic antagonists and others. So friends, many of us would be expecting a session mostly on biologicals and the pharmacotherapy in difficult asthma. But my concern, as I suggested earlier, is if you address the initial 5 steps, whatever we feel as difficult to treat in our OPD will not become difficult. The patient will be responding quite comfortably. So let's have a look how best we can go around this. So as I suggested, first you might make sure whether you are dealing with an asthma itself. Of course, we are all clinicians. We are thoroughly sure about what we are dealing with. Then just have a recap. Maybe some different thought, some parallel thought at a certain moment can bring out something else. And confirmation diagnosis, of course, for a child above 5 years, we have only one modality which is practical and really useful for us. That's only the pulmonary function test, the spirometries. Spirometry, just have a quick look at spirometry. As you know, spirometry, the normal cap, there are 2 tracings for spirometry. One is the volume time tracing and other is the flow volume tracing. So volume time tracing will always be indicative of the FEV, the forced expiratory volume, the first 1 minute. So you can see that each FEV1, a reduction of FEV1 by FVC ratio less than 0.85 is the diagnostic of asthma. So if your child, if you're not responding, if it is an older child, send for a spirometry, make sure the FEV1 by FVC is less than 0.5, and then you give a bronchodilator. See, the curve is like this before bronchodilator, and when you give a bronchodilator, the FEV1 has gone up to this. So this is something important. A child who is not responding to your regular medications, an older child who can cooperate for a spirometry, send a child for spirometry and make sure that the curve is in correspondence with an asthmatic child. And here also you can see the classical, the scalloping of the curve. The flow volume curve, scalloping is the boat shape is there. And once you, this is a normal curve and this is the boat shaped curve. And once you give a bronchodilator, the curve improves like this. So this is, my just suggestion is, just want to apprise on you that a child who is not improving, make sure you do a spirometry and get things going and convincingly. And any other investigations, of course, you have got lot many, but it's more important to rule out alternative diagnosis rather than as a clinician, we are sure about asthma, the reversible bronchospasm, the chronic inflammation and everything, but make sure you are not dealing with something else. And we have got a very, very interesting studies. Guys have gone into this. The clinical experience of allergy, the journal is there. They have got a very interesting study where they have found that the alternative where clinicians have been treating these patients who are assumed to have severe asthma, alternative diagnosis was established in 12 to 50% of these patients. It's a wide range, I know, but it's just to suggest to you that this many, 20 to 30% of children whom we assume are severe asthma may be having some alternative diagnosis. This was a study a few years back. Of course, with the newer modalities, it may have changed, but still we are sure that a certain percentage is outside. So make sure you are not dealing with the ABC, the other ABC of VC. Don't consider all that business is not asthma. So of course, there are other causes of wheezing. We have wonderful modules. We have a lot of sessions on other wheezing and underflow wheezing. So I'm not going to the details, but this is a favorite slide of my teacher and my mentor in MBBS, Dr. T.U. Sukumaran. So sir also is, and this is something which has been in my, always in the back of my mind whenever I take a patient of these the last so many years. Airway anomalies, just like your Malaysia syndromes, tracheomalacia, bronchomalacia, all those laryngeal cleft, pharyngeal web. Bronchiolitis, of course, bronchiectasis, you know, a child with a failure to thrive and with a consanguinity and a malabsorption or other issues. Cystic fibrosis is also same picture. Cardiac failure by itself can produce, the dilated left atrium can produce some compression, extrinsic compression, or the pulmonary artery can produce some compression. Congenital malformations, there's like a laryngeal web, as I mentioned, cleft and other issues can produce. Drugs, always be wary of beta blockers. And endobronchial tuberculosis, due to its inherent extrinsic compression, intrinsic compression can produce reduce the lumen of the airways and produce apparent spasm. It's not spasm, apparent obstruction. And extrinsic bronchial compression to vascular rings, aortic rings can be there. Foreign bodies, of course, and most important, gastroesophageal reflex. The interstitial lung disease, infections, and vocal cord dysfunction. This is very important in an older child, where the child of 10 to 12 years already having some symptoms of asthma. They try to somatize the symptoms and confuse the parents and even the clinicians. I got my cousin's daughter of myself who had asthma earlier, but now the symptom, she is now 13 years, and every time she gets a wheeze, symptomatic in around 2 to 3 months. So 2 occasions I was there in their household, and it turned out to be something like it was a dysfunction syndrome, where we did a bronchoscopy and found that the vocal cords adduct in spite of the paradoxical adduction of the vocal cords during inspiration. So that's what is happening. So these are all things which you have to consider if a child is not improving. These are my thoughts at this point. Friends, just have a recap. Below 6 months of age, you always consider congenital airway anomalies, aspiration syndromes, and vascular airway compression, congenital heart disease. And if a child is having a wet productive cough with unusual features like FTT, failure to thrive is there, with clubbing is there, of course, cystic fibrosis. If multifocal infection is there, you have to consider immunodeficiency. Malabsorption is there, you have to consider the PCDs, and even rhinosinusitis is there, ciliary dyskinesia. Anyway, all this has to be considered. Localizing signs, always be sure about congenital anomalies, and of course, if it's unilateral, foreign body. So these are all the asthma mimics or asthma masquerades. And if the presentation is upper airway signs, this is a very, very common presentations, allergic rhinitis and upper airway cough syndrome. So that's about asthma mimics. Now let's see whether have you taken cognizance of the comorbidities with the child may be having. Always have a look at the search for it, because you are doing it, but be methodical and see that you are not missing out anything. And just a quick look at the comorbidities. Rhinitis and sinusitis is there. And friends, it's noted that 78 to 80% of patients with asthma have some form of allergic rhinitis. So this, as you say, it's the allergic march. So that's, if you address the allergic rhinitis properly, maybe with second generation antihistamine or maybe with an inhaled nasal steroid, the child will improve dramatically. And whatever you have found as difficult will turn out to be very, very pliable and manageable. So chronic sinusitis is associated with severe asthma. A lot of studies are there supporting, and maybe you may have listened to a lot of sessions where allergic rhinitis, the experts have brought out that allergic rhinitis is associated with poor asthma control in children. Another important consideration at this point is the GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. And many a time we fail to recognize that obvious regurgitation will not be there in GERD. GERD, we may not go for the pH study, esophageal pH study. We may not go for a barium meal scan because it's maybe a little cumbersome and may not be available at all centers. But two understandings should be there at this moment. The reflex from the stomach, gastric aspirates, can produce bronchospasm by two mechanisms. One is by the reflex theory, where a reflex in the distal esophagus, because there is the innervation of the distal esophagus as well as the tracheobronchial tree is by a common route. The embryological origin is common, so the innervation is by the vagal mechanism or vagus nerve. So any stimulation in the distal esophagus, the reflex site may reach up to the distal esophagus only. It may not come to the nasal oropharynx, it may not come to present as a regurgitation. But a simple reflex, can produce a reflex spasm in the airways, in the tracheobronchial tree. The vagal stimulation will be there, and that can produce a spasm. So that itself, so a treatment with a PPI, appropriate PPI, proton pump inhibitor, will settle the issue, maybe in a child with an infant presenting with a bronchospasm. And of course, a direct contact within gastric reflux site, the obvious reflex will be there. The acidic nature of the reflex site coming through the tracheobronchial tree, the acidic nature is there. That itself can produce the direct contact, and that can produce some amount of bronchospasm. So both mechanisms are there, but whatever be the mechanism, be sure, especially in a child below 2 years, be sure the child is not having some amount of GERD, which can hamper your appropriate management of the asthma. And this is something which many a time we have to address. Obesity is related very strongly to asthma and is more strongly to non-atopic asthma. This is the key here, because obesity is associated with a non-eosinophilic inflammation. Non-eosinophilic inflammation is very difficult to treat, and there will be Th1 inflammation will be there. So even our inhaled corticosteroids may not respond. Inhaled corticosteroids responds in a situation of a eosinophilic inflammation only. So then a child presents with asthma, and when the child is having a comorbidity as obesity, this is what the recommendation from GINA as well as the National Asthma Eradication Program of United States recommend rate reduction despite poor evidence, because I have scanned literature, evidence is poor, but despite poor evidence, even GINA and the associations recommend, when British Thoracic Society recommends weight reduction as a part of asthma therapy in children with obesity. It somehow helps. Having gone through the comorbidities, now we have to have a look at the triggers. I'm not going into the triggers. You are all sure, outdoor and indoor triggers, pests, pollens, and dust mite and everything. Whatever you can address, you have to address smoking, especially the third-hand tobacco smoking, the residual nicotine in the trust of the grandparents who come from home, they smoke outside, enter the house after maybe 5 minutes, they leave their cigarette outside and enter the house and take the child in his lap. And the third-hand tobacco smoking, transfer to the child at this moment, that itself is a trigger for being found to be a trigger for asthma. So you have to be sure about the outdoor and indoor triggers. So that's my third concern. Apart from asthma mimics, the comorbidities, the triggers, and let's see the technique or the compliance. Whether you have really counseled the parents, you have given them the appropriate inhaler, the appropriate spacer, but whether they are using appropriately. Improper technique can be there. The child may not be properly supervised. Demonstration by the caregiver or the from the physician may not be fair or improper or not properly understood by the parents. So see, there is a lot of studies on this aspect also. Improper inhaler technique is associated with the poor asthma control many a time. And even the spacers are not properly used, and sometimes I'm sure that many of our colleagues in the pulmonology or chest and TB or pulmonology, or even those who are they don't advise or insist on a spacer. So the child may now have seen that the father or mother is taking the MDA without a spacer, and the child may feel that why should I use it? But maybe many times they feel that they get an improvement with the MDA alone. But make sure that convince the parents that MDA will improve the drug delivery to the target size like anything, and it will reduce the oral candidiasis. So as you see, and I have kept this graph also in a laminated form in front of my desktop itself, in my table itself. I show it to my patients. I tell them that, see, this is the amount of difference when you use a MDA with a spacer. We can see without a spacer, the MDA will give only 10% of drug delivery to the target organ. I tell them, you just by an inhalation, it is not sufficient. It has to go through the airways, reach the target, which is the trachea as well as the bronchus and the other airways. So we insist on, you have to insist on an appropriate spacer, maybe a walled one, non-walled one, whatever it is. We always say use a spacer. A lot of debate is there, VHC is good or non-VHC is good, but a spacer is always a must, and spacer will take this 10% to 40% the drug delivery. So drug spacer is a mandatory in using it. And even technique also has to be properly conveyed to the parents. Both ways you can have it. Even the breath holding technique, holding breath and holding it for 5 to 10 seconds. Or even the tidal breathing technique is enough for smaller children. Breathe in and out at normal tidal volume for 5 to 6 breaths, or maybe around 30 seconds, or as we count up to 20. Anything can be done. Then make sure that the child takes at least 5 to 6 breaths in that hold with the one actuation. So technique is important. We can suggest both the ways, but unless you have a proper technique, unless you use it, the spacer, you may not have the desired results, and your asthma may turn difficult. So in each and every visit, check inhaler technique. Ask them to bring the MDA spacer. Now the MDA spacer are smaller ones, 250 ml, smaller ones are there. So ask the patient how they use the inhaler. Don't just ask if you know how to use it. Let them demonstrate in your front. And see, and you always keep some placebo inhalers with you, demonstrate to them, let them demonstrate to you how they are using it, and make sure they are using it properly. And there is an interesting study, even where the medical person's knowledge, it was done way back, but even many caregivers or medical persons are, they lack the basic knowledge and skills with these devices. So even a certain subset of our own friends are maybe responsible for inadequate relief from the asthma due to the inadequate use of improper use of spacers and along with our MDAs. So poor asthma control, sometimes even maybe due to empty inhalers. This was the technique which was previously used, but nowadays with our integrated counters, this is not being relevant. And asthma diary should be always be used, maintain a log of number of actuations made in the asthma diary. Now with the integrated dose counters, this may be little obsolete. The counters give the reasonably near normal delivery and actuations. So that's also important. And adherence issues can be there, forgetfulness, sometimes concerns about side effects, and mostly the neighborhood doctors or the googly on TV will suggest that you don't use it. So these are all something which you have to anticipate and tell them that sometimes somebody from your relatives or your neighbors may suggest why this is you are giving an MDA to this small child. You have to adhere to this. These are the advantages, and you have to religiously go about it. And assure you that your child will overgrow your asthma by a certain age. So adherence issues, the confidence building is very important. Reassurance is very important. Looking on the revisiting what they are doing, that's also important. And apart from this, asthma education and self-monitoring is another important the facility at this moment. So self-administered questionnaires are there. Even from GINA it is there. It is the asthma action plan. GINA has come out in 2019. So if your asthma is well controlled, what to do? If your asthma is getting worse, what to do? If his asthma symptoms are severe, whether how far they can manage at home, the local contact physician's number, the emergency drug, the short-acting beta-2 agonist, or if you want to do now, it is up to the inhaled corticosteroids are being even used as a reliever. So the present suggestion is to use the SABA, not only SABA, you use ICS alongside. So whatever it is, you need to give a diary like this and give them the emergency medications as and when the symptoms get worse, and your contact number. And apps are there now, they are in the offing with the Asthma Track, Asthma Buddy, so many apps are there which can be made use of in appropriate communication with the patient and making sure that they adhere to your instructions. And if the child is not responding to inhaled corticosteroids, what can be the options around? Be wary, it could be something like a non-eosinophilic inflammation. So eosinophilic inflammation, the indicators are blood eosinophils something around more than 400 per cubic millimeter. Sputum eosinophils easily done. If you get a good sputum sample, that's important, more than 2%. And the fraction of nitric oxide in the exhaled air, FeNO, fraction of nitric oxide in the exhaled air, more than 35 parts per billion. Let's have a word about FeNO. The fraction of nitric oxide in the exhaled air is called as FeNO. FeNO is a good indicator of eosinophilic area. FeNO in values indicate whether the inflammation is eosinophilic in origin or not, whether it's Th2 type induced or Th1 type. Th2 is eosinophilic. So it is increased in eosinophilic asthma, levels rise during asthma exacerbation and reduce to normal. So that itself indicates FeNO is a good indicator of airway inflammation. What are there is a machine, there is FeNO, the FeNO machines are portable machines are there, and just like a spirometry, child above 3 to 4, you can produce some amount of forcible breathing, you may be able to perform. And the inference is like eosinophilic, more than 35 parts per billion, the inflammation is likely to be eosinophilic, and it's absolutely going to be a steroid response. This child has got no reason not to respond to inhaled corticosteroid. This child must respond. A child who is having a value of fraction of FeNO value more than 35 ppb parts per billion is going to respond invariably to ICS. A child less than 20 ppb value of FeNO, you should be little cautious. You are dealing with something like a non-eosinophilic inflammation. Think of some other options like tiotropium or biologicals or some other options. Don't be, if your still child is not responding to ICS, believe them, they are using it properly because the FeNO value suggests a non-eosinophilic inflammation and your child is unlikely to respond. So FeNO always helps us in whether making your child is going to respond or not and whether the inflammation is eosinophilic or not. And that's, friends, for the last part or last step, this is the therapy for the difficult asthma. Till now, we are filtering out those cases which are not genuinely difficult to treat. They were giving and addressing the peripheral issues, addressing the comorbidities, addressing the compliance, addressing the other issues. The difficult asthma was made as responding, but right now we are in certain patients who are not responding to GINA step 4 treatment, the median dose ICS or even median dose ICS with the LABA, the child is not responding. What is at stake? We have got the biologicals or the MAPs. MAPs means the monoclonal antibodies, MAPs. So MAPs are now ruled the roost in the immunology as well as the allergy. Because this is going to be the drug down the line, maybe after 5 years, we may be talking about MAPs only. And now being literally costly and without the evidences or coming in big longitudinal studies, not at time noted to come with for the longitudinal studies, we are little skeptical about MAPs, but maybe after 5 years we will be using MAPs. And this is omalizumab. Omalizumab basically inhibit the circulating immunoglobulin E on one side, and if at all the immunoglobulin E is there, its expression on the immunoglobulin E on the receptors is also prevented. So on both ways it acts, and thus it inhibits or interrupts the allergic inflammatory cascade set off by the IgE. So you can see the IgE omalizumab acting here, and it is the IgE expression is prevented, and subsequently the cascade is interrupted. Omalizumab, what is Gina says on omalizumab? Gina is very clear. It is given only to patients who are uncontrolled on step 4. So this is where what I have put it as difficult to treat asthma. So they are not controlled on step 4. And more important, the children should be aged above 6 and above, and they should be having IgE dependent, because it is a IgE, breaking the IgE chain only. So it has to be IgE dependent allergic asthma. You can do an immunocap or other test to see that the serum IgE is high. And a lot of studies are there supporting this. And in the United States and other parts of the Western world, omalizumab is widely used with good results. But the main constraint is the cost factor. Maybe even for 150 milligram, it comes around $1,100. It's a literally prohibitive cost. And is given as a subcutaneous injection every 2 to 4 weeks. Maybe it's once in 4 weeks is the one which is preferred. And one interesting aspect about omalizumab, which I believe all of you should be aware of, is even if we are not using it, the dose is, we are always depending on the weight per kilogram body weight. But for omalizumab, the dose is guided by, on the x-axis, the serum IgE level, and the y-axis, the BMI, the body mass index. So serum IgE level and BMI plotted, and you will get the dose of omalizumab. It is given as a subcutaneous injection once in 4 weeks, and it takes at least 3 months to show some beneficial effects. So even though you must convince your parents in advance, at least 3 months time should be there, will be there for an reasonable response with the omalizumab. Having said about omalizumab, the other monoclonal antibody in the scenario is the interleukin 5 inhibitor. Omalizumab was a immunoglobulin E inhibitor. Here we have got IL-5. IL-5 is inhibition have a beneficial therapeutic effect in asthma. Evidence B only is at present available, but the advantages here is given subcutaneous and once in a month, where other was given some maybe 2 to 4 weeks, even 3 weeks. Omalizumab, this is once in a month only, and it inhibits the eosinophil inflammation. What does Gina say on napalizumab? Gina says about 12 years only as of now, severe eosinophilic asthma, step 4 treatment, where omalizumab is recommended above 6 years, or napalizumab about 12 years only, and still we have the lot of journals, even from the Lancet as well as the NEJM, supporting or concurring with the use of napalizumab in children about 12 years. Friends, a lot of studies are there on this napalizumab, omalizumab in adult asthma, refractory asthma in adults, and lot of pulmonologists, a good number of pulmonologists are using this biologicals. And dupilumab, for your information, this is another one where napalizumab was IL-5 inhibitor, dupilumab is an IL-4 inhibitor, and it is again being recommended for some use. Having seen about the biologicals, the last part of the presentation is something like a new other molecule which we may not be that familiar with, but adult pulmonologists are mostly in right now. Tiotropium. Tiotropium is something called as a LAMA. We are all familiar with the LABA. As you all know, the bronchospasm is due to the bronchial smooth muscle relaxation can be due to a beta adrenergic action or anticholinergic action. So beta adrenergics, we usually use the salbutamol short acting or the long acting salmeterol or our formoterol. Just like salmeterol and formoterol, we have got the other the stimulation of the cholinergic system, anticholinergic system by the long acting muscarinic antagonists. They have got the M1 and M2 receptors are blocked, antagonists. They are antagonists, not agonists. And they produce smooth muscle relaxation, decrease airway inflammation, prevents airway modeling. What is just the opposite of what you get attained by the LABAs, the same way as LABA. So that is tiotropium. Tiotropium previously was cleared for use till 2019, about 12 years only. And since GINA 2019 has recommended use of tiotropium in children above 6 years. But friends, I must bring to your attention that in the North American guidelines, the NEPP asthma program, they are using the tiotropium from 2017 onwards in children above 6 years of age with good results. Tiotropium is given as an MDI as a metered dose inhaler, 9 to 18 micrograms, which comes as 9 micrograms, 18 micrograms, once a day. It is always an add-on drug after step 4. As you have seen, it is used in difficult asthma only. The patient has not responded to a medium dose of ICS or a medium dose of ICS and LABA. So in addition to that medium dose of ICS and LABA, as an add-on therapy, you can use tiotropium. So GINA guidelines recommend tiotropium step 4 and 5, and of course the anticholinergic side effects can be there, as you know, dry mouth, constipation, the drying of secretions anywhere with tachycardia and all those issues. But these are all things which can be deferred when we need to use this drug as a step 5 modality. And a word about immunotherapy in asthma. We all talk about immunotherapy now. Immunotherapy is used only in step 4 and 5, especially in adolescents and adults, not in below 16, because you see the last sentence here, GINA and British Thoracic Surgery do not recommend. But it is of the level it is being used at many centers, because parents, they are asking for some or other relief from their for the children, and maybe it is being used. But it's the only important aspect is children with allergic rhinitis and who are sensitive to house dust mite and certain types of pollen like grass and tree pollen. It is not useful in a food allergy or some other pets or other aspects. Only pollen, grass and tree pollen, as well as house dust mite. This has been found to be reasonably beneficial and mild and moderate asthma only. But as of now, the recommendations are against the use of immunotherapy in children. In adolescents and adults, it is being used, and it is only certain specific situations only. A word about bronchial thermoplasty. This is just for your information only. It is just in a refractory asthma or to the adults especially, they deliver the thermal energy and modify the airways through endoscopy procedure. That also is being done. And another word about vitamin D, of course, a panacea for everything. Maybe the biologicals, maybe the panacea, maybe after 5 years of some amount of vitamin D steroid sensitivity, and some studies are there, but of course no recommendation. The evidence-based recommendation is there. Even macrolides have been used in certain scenarios, azithromycin, because of their anti-inflammatory property. And there is something called a temperature control laminar airflow device is there in the United States and other places. Just like a mosquito net, they have got something like a big, the child sleeps in that system, and the airways, the house dust mite and other particulate matter are filtered away. So these are all some modalities. So coming back to my slide for the day, friends, we have discussed 6 aspects. The 1% of patients you can have genuinely difficult asthma, 99% patients can be filtered by these 5 steps. If you rule out the mimics, you address the comorbidities, you address the triggers wherever possible, may not be triggers or always cannot be taken. You make sure the compliance is quite good and you educate them properly, and this 99% of patients which you perceive as difficult asthma may be benefited. And that 1% you are truly genuinely difficult to treat, you have to use the biologicals. So to recap, only less than 1% are genuinely difficult to treat. As you have noted earlier, you make sure you have taken away the asthma mimics. As I said, the A, B, C, D, E, F, G of BC, all the airway malformations, you have to rule out the kind of even cardiac disorders, or even you have to the vocal cord dysfunction or ILDs, everything has to be ruled out. Comorbidity is very, very important, because as I said, 80% of children with asthma will have allergic rhinitis to some extent. As you have all been in vouch with me, many a time when you treat asthma patients with some inhaled nasal steroid, like fluticasone or mometasone nasal spray, the child improves dramatically. Maybe allergic rhinitis was not properly addressed. Environmental triggers, the parents' history as well as the grandparents has to be addressed. Even a third-hand tobacco smoking is maybe a trigger. So be sure you address all those issues. Inhaler with spacer, the proper sitting up position and properly positioned child is very important, and make sure that they use it properly. And asthma education and phenotypic assessment helps in patient lineage. Newer biologicals and LAMA to be tried as step 4 or 5, because this is the pharmacological approach in difficult asthma comes only as a last step. As I have discussed, the tiotropium, the omalizumab, mepolizumab, dupilumab, these are all in right now, but only after you have exhausted or you have gone through the other steps and you are exhausted and you are into the step 5. So follow the 6 steps, and I'm sure no asthma will be difficult. Then leave alone that 1%, no asthma will be difficult. Thank you, dear friends. You always believe that never too early, never too late. Learning is always a great experience. And if you have learned something from this presentation, I am so grateful and thankful. And it's always the right time to address airway disease. We can, anytime, we can help our child whom we patronize with something different. You have a parallel thought, think differently. Something else may be coming up. Children whom you feel perceive as difficult asthma, you don't have to refer to anywhere. You yourself can manage it in the most appropriate way, and your children are going to be benefited in good manner. Thanks, my dear chairperson, Dr. Jayan Joshi, as well as our the branch office bearer, the chapter office bearer is Dr. Jagadish Chinnappa, as well as Dr. Subramaniam, and all my participants who are logged in. My seniors are around. I can see a lot of good number of seniors and all my dear friends. And I am so grateful that the chapter has given me a platform along whom there you have got a lot of cream faculty who have come in again and who are yet to come in the future. And best wishes for the charter. I believe Subbu's dream of 200 per person, and the charter even matching the Indian Academy of Pediatrics in 30,000 plus numbers. You can make it, Subbu, with your ambitious run. I am very sure this, with you, so much of workforce behind you, you are sure going to hit the bull. Please, very much. Thank you very much, dear friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. It was a very nice, very elaborate presentation, and congratulations for covering the topic so well. And the way you approached it, it was extremely useful for everyone. There are already good reviews coming on the chat box for the talk, and I am sure everybody has been really made more knowledgeable and happy about it. Now, there are a few questions in the chat box, so let us take a few of them. This one question is, of course, I think all of us know that this is by Dr. Sri Gopal, who asked that how to improve compliance of young kids for using inhaler with spacer and mask. Parents face a lot of difficulties. I think Dr. Ramesh, would you take this? I think what you need is basically patience, a lot of patience. And here, when you talk in terms of giving treatment for asthma, particularly for under 5 users, it is not the prescription which matters. You should also give the time, because it is not only important what you write on a piece of paper. The parents are going to have a lot of questions in their mind, and it is important that you give them adequate time to address their issues. By giving more time, by giving proper discussion, by taking them into confidence, it is going to improve the success rate of your treatment. So you must understand, particularly for under 5s, you must take a lot of effort to do the counseling. Dr. Ramesh, please add.
Yeah, Jayan bhai, that's excellent. You have rightly put it, and that's an interesting question. And you have rightly pointed out patience is the key there. But I must say, what I have been using it, I just give this inhaler, this spacer, and everything. It's a colorful one. Give it to the child. Put the child on the bed. Give it in his lap, and ask him as a plaything. And first of all, I ask the mother or the elder sister is there to put it on their face first, and make the child that the anxiety or the apprehension about this. Anybody, even we are worried about something put on our face. Even a mask now we are used to it just because of the COVID only. Otherwise, the mask was for the physicians as a little troubling. So the child may feel that his elder sister is using, his mother is using, then why not me? Okay, fine, let us have it. And the child will be playing with it, and then touching here, touching on the face, touching here, and then keeping on the face. So you have to take time. That's you said basically patience is required. So you tell them that you make it a plaything, don't use it at the first shot. The child should feel comfortable, and the apprehension about this must be taken away, and then only use it. Maybe you can take a day, even as a plaything, leave it on the bedside with the child or on the couch, and child will play with it and keep it on the different sides, and then suddenly, then you keep it on the face.
I think I would just say, Dr. Subramania will agree with me that with years of spending in treating children with asthma, I think you come out with these innovative ideas, and it only reflects on your long years of experience in management of asthma that you come with these innovative ideas, because we all have gone through this phase that how we find it difficult for the parents to comply with the treatment. And that's the reason why we come with these excellent additions, Dr. Ramesh. particularly to make the child get more confidence about giving the treatment. And also, the most important thing is that, particularly for under 5 year, you always make sure that the seal of the mask is properly made over the nose and the mouth. In the process of achieving the correct treatment, that is the most important step. Rest everything, I would agree with you. Let's take the next question.
Jen, can I just make a small point?
Yeah, please.
What we mean by giving more time? You know, we need to give time. We need to give time every week, every time we hear from faculty. What we mean by giving more time? And my dear friends who are over here, please, what we mean by giving time is give time for them to speak.
Correct.
And you don't speak more. What I understand by that is, see, you might be addressing something else about a space or a lecture about an MDI, which they doesn't, and they might not have understood a diagnosis. And you are explaining about the device. Or suppose they have understood a diagnosis, and if their questions is about a device, you go on telling that I am not sure of asthma. You know, it may be asthma, it may not be asthma. If you come to know by 3 months, suppose he has accepted why you want to spend time there. So, my dear friends, it is not about spending time. It is about spending that time judiciously and listening to them and addressing their queries, and you know, be little rock solid that they should get confidence in you. And your body language is going to make them follow you up. And as and when you grow stronger, the dropouts from asthma will be lesser and lesser. Thank you.
Point very well taken, Dr. Subbu. I absolutely agree with you. And you must be a good listener too, because, you know, it's very difficult to convince parents just with the diagnosis. As we know, all of us, how we beat around the bush of giving a bold diagnosis of asthma in first place. We will call it allergic bronchitis, asthmatic bronchitis, without really touching the core of the problem. So I think from our end also, we have to be confident, we have to be bold, and we have to be assertive. And okay, now let's go to the next question. Dr. Ravi Sharma asks that when you are having a comorbidity in the form of allergic rhinitis, do we need to add the dose of intranasal steroid to the total dose of inhalational corticosteroids while calculating the maximum dose? Dr. Ramesh?
Yes, very much, because this is what is the dictum, and this is the rule there. When we consider adding an INS to an ICS, intranasal steroid to inhaled corticosteroid, to always make sure that the total dose of steroids must be taken into consideration. And many a time you don't have to, you may not to go beyond the medium dose, the upper ceiling of the medium dose.
Absolutely correct. There is another question from Dr. Ravi Sharma, who says, now you mentioned about the minority group, which is the true therapy resistant asthma, like where you discussed about the various new modalities like the biologicals, the omalizumab, the mepolizumab. Now that in those all conditions, it was a prerequisite to understand that it was only relevant for eosinophilic inflammatory asthma. He is asking how to manage non-eosinophilic inflammatory asthma. Any inputs?
Yes, in non-eosinophilic, it's basically something away from ICS, inhaled corticosteroids. You may have to look at the LAMA, the long-acting, the anticholinergics like tiotropium. If it's an older child, if it's a smaller child, you may have to go for the biologicals, of course, may have to try. And then oral steroids, of course, that could be other options, because ICS is not, this is a very, very, very small subset. That's a phenotype lineage is important, very, very small subset. And that's what I said, obesity, if it is there, address obesity, because obesity is something which we can address rather than addressing the asthma alone. And they are not clear about why the evidence is poor, as I said, despite the poor evidence, even the North America, the NAEP recommends that obesity should be addressed, and if obesity is addressed, that gives a response.
So just to sum up what Dr. Ramesh Kumar is saying, Dr. Ravi, the answer to your question is that basically it's a very small set of patients where you have a neutrophilic inflammation, and I think more often than not it is associated with conditions like obesity, and that is a practical illustration wherein you find that these children do not fare very well. So they have inherent problem with response to inhalational corticosteroids. So you have to sub-classify them and treat them according to their merit. Another interesting question is by Dr. I don't read his name.
Can I ask Ramesh, if you don't mind, a supplementary question to that? Can you use montelukast in them, non-eosinophilic asthma?
Of course, you are taking a big debate there. Actually, I think all
Opening
our
the Pandora's box.
and opening not only that, our audience will really be enthused to hear about Monty Lucas, and they will fall into two categories right now. Somebody who is following the theoretical line, the Puritans. Puritans will say no Monty Lucas for asthma. And I say, if I say in a platform, if I'm in a formal presentation, I will say no. But off the label, almost all of us are using, maybe not, but some indicate. I am not using much. I am very clear. I am using very, very rarely my Monty Lucas occasionally. I am not having a maybe 1% of or 2-3% of patients only having Monty Lucas. I use it only when there's allergic rhinitis as a comorbidity or adenoiditis is chronic adenoid hypertrophy is there. Where a medical, instead of a medical adenoidectomy, I use Monty Lucas with an inhaled corticosteroid. Otherwise, Monty Lucas alone, previously it was recommended away from asthma. I'm saying about viral episodic Bs to prevent as a short course like that. But asthma per se, Monty Lucas, the leukotriene receptor antagonist is not recommended per se asthma. It is not beneficial.
Dr. Ramesh, you have based your presentation basically on GINA guidelines. And GINA strongly discourages the use of Monty Lucas. Second important point for Monty Lucas is that whether you use it, as Dr. Ramesh mentioned about in some cases, selective cases, one thing is for sure as an important take-home message for all the doctors who are attending, never use a combination of Monty Lucas and levocetirizine. That combination is unethical. It is not correct. Pharmacologically, it is not correct. So if at all one is required to use Monty Lucas, use it separately. Okay, another.
Dr. Jain, one more issue, sir, is right now there's a growing concern about the side effects of Monty Lucas in the sense the suicidal tendencies, the hyperirritabilities.
Yes. That is another important
so this is the parents are, they may be, you say nothing, use it for 3 months, 6 months, but they may be looking at somebody, some digital information, social media information, or some Googling parents, IT parents. You must be really wary of them. They may come back to you, sir, that my child is having digital issues, and you may be even be sued. So this is some important concern. Don't use Monty Lucas indiscriminately. Only use an add-on drug, and as you said, never use it with the antihistamine. Yes, sir, please.
Now there are a few questions related to the talk, not really in terms of the difficult to treat asthma, but there are general questions of role of oral theophylline in difficult asthma. I think you can just sum up in 1 or 2 lines because.
Theophylline per se is not in pediatrics. Pediatric asthma, children with asthma, theophylline are not recommended. Maybe the other the pulmonologists, they are using it in a big way, doxorubicin and other the theophylline molecules, new generation theophylline molecules. But for my information, and I have not used it for the last 20 years, and for my information, the role of theophylline in childhood asthma is virtually, unless in an ICU setting where you have faced with it very difficult, then maybe the last drug or last phase you can use. What is your take, sir, or Subramania or Jagadish, sir? Theophylline.
Theophylline actually, is a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, and the problem is the dose versus safety dose, therapeutic dose and safety margin is very less. And when you are using in a desperate situation like stage 4 or stage 5, that is the time I think parents also accept some kind of this thing. The problem is GI disturbances are quite nausea, vomiting. At least all those people whom we have prescribed theophylline, we should be very careful. When prescribing theophylline, you should also understand that the liquid formulations are to be discouraged. And the newer theophylline which have come with glamour and brand, they are not that better than the conventional theophylline. Of course, I'm just making a broader statement. I'm sorry. My apologies for making simplicity. Of course, there will be some improvements, but the most important thing is that person should be told that when you get an acute flare-up, please tell the doctor you are already on theophylline. He should not give loading dose of aminophylline.
Absolutely. Very important point. Just sorry for being offline for a short while. Another interesting question, one very practical question by Dr. Ravi Sharma. How frequently you should change the spacer? I think we all of us know answer. I think if it is regularly, properly used and well maintained, once in a year is the right answer for that. But maybe Dr. Ramesh, if you want to add something.
Yes, sir. The recommendation is 6 months to 1 year. Those who can afford, they can change by 6 months because given the benefit you derive from, and the parents may not be properly washing sometimes. So 6 months, even putting some $300 at once in 6 months, really worth investing.
James, can I answer it in a lighter vein? How frequently you change your toothbrush? How frequently you change your
Yes, that's a very practical way of putting it. Yes.
yeah, so it depends on how you use it. Suppose you are using only SOS therapy in case of intermittent bronchodilators and the child is not on long-term steroids, then you may use your spacer for years together. It is not damaged at all. So if you are regularly using, once in 6 months you need to change.
Okay, there is one interesting question, Dr. Ramesh. If the kids are suffering from febrile URTI, like an acute pharyngitis or LRTI, should we be holding the ICS therapy for some time?
Absolutely no. Why should you hold on? There is nothing, because we are dealing with a febrile URTI on maybe a viral URI that can still trigger, and we need to control the inflammation at that moment. More important actually. So you don't have to hold on ICS at any moment. In fact, the child requires an ICS more particularly around that time.
Not only that, and let me add it to you, if a child is on a regular ICS therapy and even has a flare-up, and if you require to use a short-acting beta-2 agonist for a long time, for a short time, your ICS therapy should continue unabated. You should not discontinue it for a while. Whether in that case, even your child requires a short course of oral steroid also, your ICS therapy, as it is, the dose is limited, you should not change it.
Okay. Then I will add a small point. In case of viral infections, what happens is there is an epithelial damage. And because of the epithelial damage, the epithelium becomes more leaky to the allergens.
Correct.
And therefore, all the more you should control the inflammation, because even the viral inflammation will become viral inflammation plus.
Absolutely.
You stop steroids.
Absolutely. Another important question is, can you elaborate on exercise-induced asthma, the diagnostic parameters and treatment for how long? Just briefly, Ramesh.
Exercise-induced asthma. The diagnostic parameters, I'm not certain. Chairperson.
Basically,
you
can better take it, because I'm not sure about the.
I take a question. Exercise-induced asthma is two types. Per se, exercise-induced asthma, where exercise is the only trigger, versus exercise as one of the triggers in an uncontrolled asthma. This is the first thing that the pediatricians have to differentiate. The second one is more common. That means more often the exercise is one of the triggers, and exercise intolerance in an asthmatic is a sign of poor control of asthma. Nocturnal cough and exercise-induced symptoms will reflect poor control of asthma. This is very, very important, irrespective of what you grade. The moment they say night cough, and the moment they say when you run, you will get the cough, that means they are cheating you, they are telling you, and they are not taking inhalation corticosteroids. This is point number one. Second thing is, in exercise-induced asthma, you must remember that there is a physiology called as exercise-induced bronchoconstriction and exercise-induced asthma. Bronchoconstriction is a physiology where you don't have to do any treatment. Normal persons can have it. Is never trigger-induced. Only exercise-induced. Airways are like this. And when the cold blast of air goes, they become like touch-me-not plant. Touch-me-not plant. Like this. That's actually what happens in an exercise-induced asthma. They become like touch-me-not, and after some time they open up. Even your hands, when you walk in a cold winter, they become blushed. Pale, and then when you vomit back, it will come back. So airways are also thermosensitive, chemosensitive, flow sensitive. So in fact, they are more sensitive. So if it is physiology, it is called as exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. If it is pathology, it is called as exercise-induced asthma. And before exercise, you must take bronchodilator. It depends on the bronchodilator you take. If you take short-acting bronchodilator, half an hour before the exercise you have to take. If your exercise is likely to be prolonged, let's say you are participating in some state sports like 2 or 3 days, then you can take long-acting along with steroids. But that time you may have to take for 2 or 3 days. Otherwise, usually before the anticipated exercise you must take. That's a small key point. So further discussion exercise asthma, please watch out for advanced asthma training module where we will tell you a little more. Now I'll allow Dr. Ramesh Kumar to answer more questions.
No, thank you. I'll just take one more question because there are a lot of questions which are already covered by Dr. Ramesh Kumar. Just a word about cow's milk protein allergy. Does it present at asthma? Can you just briefly comment on cow's milk protein allergy, which is
CMPA as such will not produce asthma. It's not known to produce asthma. CMDA will produce other manifestations, especially GI symptoms such as occult bleed and some cutaneous manifestations. Absolutely. And it's mostly the asthma age group is above, usually as such is above 3 years and 4 years, and it's very rare to find a child with asthma below 3 years, means classical. And CMDA is more common in the infants and the toddler age group. So they don't usually, theoretically, don't present with an asthma.
Okay. So I think now we are running short of time. So probably I'll just sum up. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramesh, for enlightening.
There was one question, Jayant, if you don't mind. Somebody has asked the cost of Pheno.
Pheno, huh?
It will be around 4 to 5 lakhs.
Okay, fine.
That was just the answer that we wanted to give it to them. And WhatsApp to me, become member of the chapter. I will send you the company's number, everything. In a lighter way. In a lighter way.
Yeah. So I think coming back to just summing up what Dr. Ramesh Kumar, he gave a fantastic overview of difficult to control asthma. And one thing you must have understood from his talk, that it is not the difficulty in controlling asthma, it is a difficulty in communication. So before you call, there is hardly a minuscule percentage of patients who are true therapy resistant asthmatics, whereas most of the other ones are the ones who are probably lagging. Either there is a wrong diagnosis, or there is an error in treatment, there are compliance issues, or there are some other factors like comorbids. So as he's beautifully highlighted all the details, before you must, whenever any patient comes to you for your follow-up who is on regular inhalers, make it a point to check the compliance, make it a point to make him bring the device every time, spare the time with him, check the inhaler, check the device, check the usage, tell them to get all the inhalers. And this is very important. We all discuss in our ATM modules also that the success of your therapy will depend upon how much you are, so to say, insistent, or even for that matter, aggressive in that regard in terms of that. When the patients understand how sincere you are to their child's cause, they will definitely be compliant to your treatment and you will be more successful. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramesh Kumar, for the very beautiful talk. And it's a great privilege to be with you. And being a close friend and associate with the executive board, we would like to see you doing far more good things for the IAP. And thank you very much once again. With that, I think I'll give it to Dr. Subramania for the final comment without mentioning about the respiratory chapter membership.
No, that word came from you, so I'm so happy. Dr. Ramesh Kumar, there are some more questions in the chat box. You can answer them to them. But if you have the patience, then would you take up, or shall we wind up the session? Ramesh, it is up to you.
No,
one or two are there.
He has already answered most of them.
Macrolides in asthma, and how long to take Montelukast?
Macrolides, actually I have put a word in my slide. I didn't put a slide. Macrolides have been in between, maybe in the 2014 or 17, because macrolides have got a good anti-inflammatory activity. And because of anti-inflammatory activity, macrolides are found to give as an antibiotic whenever a viral URI or a child with a V is presented. We used to, a lot of practitioners used to give macrolides, azithromycin, for that reason. And they used to give good response. Not because of they are treating the infection, it was treating some amount of inflammation. But macrolides, azithromycin especially, is a drug reserved for the multi-drug resistant Salmonella, MDRST. And now we are talking about antimicrobial stewardship to the core. We are talking about antibiotic abuse. We are talking about, so at a time when we are talking about all these things, we should not use macrolide antibiotic to counter an airway inflammation and bronchospasm.
Absolutely.
Influenza vaccine and asthma.
Flu vaccine, influenza vaccine in asthma, of course, somebody has asked 6 months or 1 year. Of course, it is 1 year only. Ideal time is the pre-rainy season in Indian settings, April or May. And in your American settings, it is the pre-winter season, actually November, December, they give the vaccine. The WHO gives the vaccine every year. And asthma per se, I'm not sure, I'm not still convinced about the vaccine, how far it is beneficial in asthma patients. because the vaccine we are giving for influenza, and influenza can produce a viral infection, and it can produce some amount of mucosal inflammation, of course. But the evidences are maybe I believe forged evidences with the pharma. I am not sure. What is your take? Because I have listened
No,
to
I can tell you that influenza is not a trigger for acute flare-ups. That is point number one.
Exactly.
Influenza can be severe in a given asthmatic. So therefore, better to protect him from influenza. It is not going to protect asthma.
Exactly.
So that's the message. No, Ramesh Kumar, Jayant, I'm sorry. We will not leave anybody disappointed because those who have asked questions. Jayant, just scroll down once again if you are. If we have left out any of the questions.
Yeah, there is one question which I found a little off the track, but I'll take it. Someone has asked, Dr. Muthu has asked, incidence of hypertension in uncontrolled or difficult to treat asthmatic patients in your experience. Perhaps he wants to ask, because of the high dose of steroid which you are contemplating, does it really cause any hypertension?
So far, I don't have much cases with refractory asthma, to be frank. Step 4 and 5, because basically we didn't have that many cases. Whatever has been there, it was controlled with the high dose ICS, maybe medium dose or high dose ICS, and they never went for hypertension. Inhaled corticosteroids, of course, the previous thought was it affected the vertical height to some extent, but even that is also disproved. With the longitudinal studies, maybe over 15 to 20 years, that also has been disproved. So hypertension is not so far being documented as one of the documented side effects of long-term use of ICS. So far, not documented.
No, I think the answer would be for that person with due regards is before you get hypertension, you get other features of steroid toxicity very obvious to you. You may have Cushingoid faces, you may have other features of steroid before even you would get hypertension. So it is a syndrome and very easily recognizable. Then it only means that you should go for steroid sparing measures. Maybe even try biologicals and bring down, or you can do allergy testing and desensitize them and cut down the steroids. Ramesh would very happily agree with me, being also fan of allergy chapter. So I mean, some places there to cut down the steroids in some of them, or even it could be environmental measures. So being chairperson of environmental chapter also, he will smile with me. So therefore, you need a holistic and integrated approach and treat, not asthma, treat the patient. Last question was asked was how long you would give Montelukast. Ramesh, you did not answer.
One question, before the Montelukast question, there is one question I missed out, which is very important. Someone has asked, Dr. Sarvesh has asked, children on ICS for asthma and inhaled steroids or nasal spray for allergic rhinitis, are they at more risk of getting viral infections, particularly influenza and COVID, by reducing local immunity? Anyone? Dr. Ramesh?
No way.
Absolutely. As of now, we don't have, because the COVID is there only for 6 months. We don't have any. Maybe after 2 years, we may have come out with more scenarios. The COVID invariably produces some mucosal disruption and other aspects. But as I understand, as per my information, as it stands now, it's not going to produce any untoward effects.
And let me answer in this way. The risk of COVID is not different in asthmatics and non-asthmatics, because you get an infection from the community. Whether person is asthmatic or not is the host. Host doesn't decide. If you wear a mask and if you don't wear a mask, whether you come in contact with
the question is not the risk. How far is the impact? That is what the question is. Whether
I'm answering that. Currently, if you think asthma is the only issue in that particular patient and his entire body is not pro-inflammatory, then the response to COVID may not be pro-inflammatory. What I meant was, let me tell you this way, where I'm also not having experience of treating hundreds of COVID patients, but I'm trying to explain the physiology. Suppose you have obesity plus asthma. That means this particular person plus also allergic rhinitis. That means he has a pro-inflammatory state. So that means he may have cytokine storm or inflammatory response. Let's say somebody has asthma and he took inhalation corticosteroids and now he is breathing well. You need not have to scare because you were asthmatic. Somebody who had a transient wheeze or got treatment for 1 or 2 episodes and then he's off and then still he's not getting it. So it all depends on bodies. I think you need to not diagnose asthma, you need to diagnose pro-inflammatory state in that person, that will give an index, because how you do after COVID depends on your inflammatory markers and how you respond immunologically with inflammation.
There is one
The
question.
inhaled,
Dr. Rajesh,
can I add? The inhaled corticosteroids
please.
are going to modify the airway inflammation only. It is not going to affect your systemic response.
Systemic inflammation, no.
So it's not going to basically by going by the logistics. It need not be produce any additional impact.
It is absolutely safe.
I feel COVID is still a revolving story. So probably since
We'll have more data to come in.
and we'll talk about
Exactly,
it
yeah.
later.
I agree with
There is
our
one
person.
question about the magnesium sulfate. I think its role in acute asthma. I think not relevant to this topic, but the question was asked by Dr. Rajesh Maheshwari. So since
I
Dr.
think it is
Peter
always been is recommended, and you all know the dose and everything. And
ICU management available. So I think
ICU
we
management.
have covered most of the questions, and thank you, Dr. Ramesh Kumar, once again for sharing your.
And I must put on note my chairperson, who was so crisp and very clear in your thoughts and the responses. I believe I have heard you for the first time. I'm hearing you very closely and one to one. So I've heard you presenting your topics, but as a moderator, it has been fantastic, and you put the responses very appropriately from your side also as add-on comments. Wonderful and so good.
Thank you so much.
Great.
The privilege is on my side. Thank you, Dr. Subramanya. And I think we will wind up the session now. Thank you, everyone, for attending the session. I think you will all get benefited from it. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thank you, my dear participants and my dear office bearers of respiratory chapter. It was a wonderful, very exciting to be being with you all in this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Subbu. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Jayan Joshi. I would thank Dr. Jagdish Chinnappa for being present, and I would also thank ClearNet. Please look out for WhatsApp messages for future webinar webinars as well. Please be on your toes. And Shampa Care, good night. Bye bye. See you. Thank you very much.
Good night. Bye bye.
Good night, sir. Good night.
Thank you.
I'm ending the meeting for all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.